Without using any further minutes of your precious time, I hand over the word to VYTENIS ŠIMKUS from Swedbank, who will make a macroeconomic briefing. VYTENIS, the floor and the screen, I should say, is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me into this meeting. I'll give a very short overview of the state of the world, where we are at from the economic side of things. And even though I'll talk about economics, first of all, I think it's important to address some the major elephant in the room, the health problem that is causing the economic problem. So at the first glance, we are seeing some glimmer of hope. Even in the United States and in other places, it seems that the growth of new cases is plateauing, and the spread of the disease is no longer accelerating. The bad news is that we do not have good data. The only thing that we really know about the data is that it is wrong, and we do not even know by how much it is wrong. Is it by a factor of 10? Is it by a factor of 30 or 100 or whatever? That's why next steps will be very important in antibody testing and other measures to see and get some real good data on how prevalent the disease is in the society. Maybe a significant portion of the society already has immunity, etc., etc. One thing is clear, that we will be living in extraordinary times until we get a permanent solution to the health problem, either through vaccine or effective treatment, or inventive ways to organize life via tracking people through apps or other ways that we can live without the threat of the disease. We had some economic data come out in the past month. One obvious problem with macroeconomic data is that it is very lagging, and we are really, as most businesses and people are facing uncertain times, as are economists facing very uncertain times, and we really have to resort to some very innovative and imaginative ways in trying to foresee what's going to happen, because we do not know what's happening in the real time. We can only grasp it from other things because the traditional macroeconomic measures are either not there or are not built to capture the situation in these extraordinary times, although even some traditional measures are showing that we are facing an unprecedented slowdown in economic activity across the globe. Here you can see our forecast that we made in the end of March. By now it's probably outdated, of course. We have forecasted that global economy is going to shrink 2% this year. Given the very high uncertainty, and because nobody knows how long the lockdowns will continue and how quick the recovery will be, every forecasting house and every institution are scrambling to make forecasts, and the range of forecasts is very, very wide these days, ranging from fairly mild contractions to very, very severe. A lot of you probably seen Bank of Lithuania forecasts a couple of weeks ago, and which were much more dramatic than ours, at least in their choice of their main scenario. IMF also released forecasts yesterday, I think, which estimates that the world growth will be -3% this year, but they also presented 3 more negative scenarios. Their baseline scenario is like our negative scenario a month ago. I'm not completely writing off that we could see a faster bounce back, but it is conditional on good public policy and good health policy as well. The problem with the lockdowns is, of course, that most businesses can survive a week of a lockdown. probably all can survive a week of lockdown. Probably most can survive a month, but probably a few can survive 3 months without any revenue. So these lockdowns have non-linear effects on economic performance. It gets worse with every additional day that we cannot return to work normally. And that is a problem because once the initial shock, the supply shock of not being able to work due to quarantine subsides, then you'll have the secondary problem of a demand shock because you would have high unemployment, people would not have incomes to spend. So that's why it is very important to have a good strategy of moving out of the lockdown and keeping it and supporting people's incomes in the meanwhile and preserving jobs and businesses. The good news are that Lithuania is not particularly exposed from the main channels of transmission. The sectors that are in complete lockdown, such as tourism and hospitality, restaurants, do not take up a very significant part of Lithuanian economy. However, given that the Lithuanian economy is extremely open, one of the most open economies in Europe, and that we are very dependent on external demand and export performance and transport of services, we are more likely to see more severe secondary negative effects through the reduction of foreign demand and export performance. So while we might be less affected directly, we can see a bigger slump in the second part of the year. As I was saying, we economists as well have to resort to fairly imaginative ways of tracking economic performance these days. And probably a lot of you have heard that electricity consumption is a good measure these days. And maybe the interpretation is not as easy as some economists try to put it, but definitely electricity consumption shows that the economic activity has slowed down substantially. It's difficult to say, is it 5%, 10%, or 15%? We'll probably see in a couple of weeks' time when the first estimate of GDP will come out, but definitely we have observed a very sharp slowdown compared to the same time last year. We also looked at the credit card volumes that we have internally at the bank to see maybe we can draw some inferences about consumption patterns. And yes, we can see that both the cash outs and card transactions have fallen sharply. Cash dropped by a lot more, mostly due to probably because people cannot move, and there are strict recommendations against using cash in favor of contactless payments or simply card payments. But it will be very interesting to see how these things develop, especially now that more retail stores can open from today, and whether any of this will pick up. We'll probably be seeing this next week. If I do not have the numbers here, but if we would see this by sector, the essential items, food and other household articles have actually grown since the quarantine started, as the people stockpiled and went out less. But items such as travel and tourism and luxury goods have completely collapsed in the 70, 80, 90%. But you all know that because you see your revenues. So yeah, moving forward, you can see the path that we projected of how recovery could look back in the end of March. Though I'm not completely writing it off. I think it could happen if we and the governments are smart about doing this. But of course, the quality of public policy is very, very important, and probably we'll see a flatter recovery trajectory. One silver lining is that central banks are providing extraordinary support around the world, and despite the turmoil in financial markets, governments and businesses are able to borrow in the capital markets. Governments more easily. It depends. Corporates are having a worse time, but it's not completely frozen as it could have been given the scale of the economic fallout. There certainly needs a lot more coordination among the European levels, European finance ministers on the joint European response to funding and to economic policy, how we will move forward. One thing is clear, that economic measures will be needed not only for a 3-month period, but they will be needed for longer, and we'll need them to rebuild economies, because there will be lasting consequences. And we need to be fast, and then we need to be quite ambitious with the scale of the public support measures. So yeah, of course, the opening up and the recovery will be gradual and uneven across sectors, and domestically oriented services and even domestic tourism will probably recover quite quickly, but sectors that are dependent on foreign demand, on foreign flow of goods, will be probably facing a very bad year, and it's very unlikely that we'll see a rapid recovery in those places. So yeah, that's about it. Thanks.
Yep, so thank you very much, Mr. ŠIMKUS. Your presentation was indeed very insightful, and let's hope that all the tendencies will rise up faster than all the economists in the world can even imagine. I now invite the Vice Minister of Economy and Innovation, Mr. ELIJUS ČIVILIS, to introduce the state support measures for tourism industry. I kindly remind all the participants that you may submit questions via the chat screen. Vice Minister?
Hey, thanks for the mic. Good day, everyone. I'm excited to be here just for simple reasons that conversations like this, they help us better, to align the actions, because this is not a single body that can help in recovering the whole country, because it's actually coming from all sides. That's the governments play their side, businesses, and also citizens. So before I start telling you a little bit about what, so to speak, products are launching governments to support tourism, I should maybe start with the gap analysis, where we were before COVID-19 and where we are today. So basically, although the previous speakers said that tourism was not that significant in Lithuania, yes, it's just around 5% of GDP, but we think this is already a big portion because our GDP is quite diverse. And 5% has been mainly contributed by both local and foreign tourism who would be coming to Lithuania. And now we understand that whatever we project to the future, it's really uncertain. Uncertain because nobody really knows what the future looks like and when it will be that we will get back to business as usual, especially seeing those notes from US saying that they might be closed for the next 2 years. The European Commission saying that, hey guys, don't even plan any travels before the summer. So naturally we understand that this sector is going to be hit unprecedentedly. I mean, we have never ever had anything like this, because this is not something our companies did wrong. This is not something our government did wrong, but this is rather like a natural disaster where all of a sudden we got this earthquake, blowing out our whole sector. From our ministry, then we look to the tourism. We think that this will have a very huge impact. We forecast that in total, the overall numbers of the tourists will decrease by 1% throughout 2020. So in other words, we've been having around 2 million foreign visitors a year. Now this will be, together with locals, decreasing rapidly. We understand that the foreign tourism will decline by 40%, while local tourism most probably be the one which will recover fastest. And so altogether, we think that this is going to be at least minus 30% of the current sector revenues what we had a year before. And this will correspond to shrinking our GDP by 1% just from tourism alone. So all this together, we are now applying different instruments to facilitate our industries. And I should say our governmental approach is not to concentrate on single industry alone, but rather to take a horizontal view, because this has a hit through many areas that are very much connected. So one of the first measures, of course, that were publicly communicated, they were related to the employment, securing the workspaces. And it was now launched with the first subsidies for the suspending employees. Then you most probably have heard a lot about our tax exempts and our tax vacations that has been postponed, not just to the end of the current term, but also for the next 2 to 4 months. Then it comes to the financial contribution. Unfortunately, our country is now receiving a lot of criticism about not being that fast. Then it comes to the, allocating the money or money reaching the end accounts or the enterprises. And one of the reasons is that in the past, we haven't had instruments to do so. So in the past, we just simply haven't had those type of schemes, organizations, and laws that would allow us to implement our economy recovery plan. So now we are seeing it in 2 phases, so to speak. First is basically mitigating the risk that exists with the current hit of the virus. And the second, we see it as a support for recovering industries from this crisis after quarantine is over. So talking about the sustaining the economy, as I was telling, we have cross-sectoral measures and instruments to do so. So you most probably heard about guarantees that compounds to 851 million, also about loans that has just started for the small and medium enterprises, which is about 287 millions. And then we talk about risk capital investment, and finally compensating interests for the loans that you have in the banks. So most of those instruments are now very much communicated on different sources. One of the primary organizations that stands behind this is our INVEGA, and invega.lt has all the application forms where you can already get the applications approved. Now, coming back to the tourism, as I was telling, we see it as a cross-sectoral. So all of those instruments that I have just explained, they are applicable to tourism as well. But then looking to the future, we have already set a couple of initiatives to support the local tourism right after the quarantine will be over. And this will include, of course, the internal or the local tourism, and it will very much also depend on the neighbor countries, how they will behave. If they will open up, most probably this won't get directly into the big conferences, it won't get into the big concerts and events, but most probably we can target to the individual tourists. And this is how our promoting campaigns are now built on. So all in all, as I said, I think tourism is hit the most in this country, and And I think we need more and more discussions to understand what extra could be done on the government level to sustain our businesses. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Vice Minister. I am confident that the attendees will have plenty of questions directed to you and myself. I will ask some questions with regards to some extra state aid measures that might be directed to the tourism industry directly, but let's wait until the question and answer session. And I now introduce to you the next speaker, who is Mrs. GAVELIENŽ, the General Manager of Estravel and the President of the National Tourism Business Association. Mrs. ŽYDRŽ, I have no doubts that you have many insights, both from the travel agency's point of view and from overall tourism business perspective. And I pass the word to you. ŽYDRŽ?
Sorry. Oh, okay, sorry. I just
we can hear you.
myself. Can you hear me now?
Yes, everything is fine. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for inviting, and it's really a pleasure being here and sharing how we live today. Adding to what ELIJUS said recently, I just wanted to show the numbers, you know. Actually, incoming business is generating to Lithuanian economy 1 billion euro yearly, and outgoing business 300 million euros yearly as well. And in travel agency business or tour operator business, we have more than 3,000 employees. Overall, in tourism travel business in Lithuania, we have 40,000 employees. So you can imagine how many people are involved in this crisis. And it's really, really tough. And actually, despite that I'm the manager of Estravel, who is the member of Swedish Chamber, as well, I'm running two associations currently. It's National Tourism Business Association, uniting travel agents and tour operators. And another association is Lithuanian Tourism Chamber, uniting all the tourism associations in Lithuania. And as well, I'm the board member of the European Travel Agencies Association. So I really know how other countries are helping for travel business to survive the situation. And actually, if coming back to the travel agent business, I have to say that we have really tough situation with the clients or wishing to refund for their unused travel packages. And that is the biggest headache today to travel agents and tour operators. And we are asking state aid for this. And unfortunately, the president vetoed our wish to have the travel coupons, and now we have to look for another ways of refunding. We do want to refund to every traveler and for them to use money as the best they can do it, but we have to understand as well that we don't have those money in our accounts. The money somewhere worldwide with the partners, airlines and suppliers. That's why we really need state aid. And the most successful ways of helping to travel business is Denmark and Netherlands, and as well Germany. So they are really establishing the state aid funds. And for this fund, we need no less than 31 million euros. It's not a lot, but actually it would help to keep as many working places as possible. Another thing that, as I already said, my aim in the company and as well in the association is to keep as many jobs as possible, but as well we do understand that travel agency business will not get back to normal until 2021. And so extension of period of covering the downtime for employees until the end of the year, that would be really help. And as well, liquidity, as every company in Lithuania now faces, we need loans to cover the unpaid invoices and future payments. So that's briefly about the travel business. And I have to say that we are really struggling with support as every business, and especially in travel business, in tour operators business and agencies, it's really, really struggle right now. So we are an association talking daily, encouraging everyone not to fire employees right now, to keep the working places and you know, it's really tough. We have to admit it, but we believe we will survive. With state help, we will survive better. We will have much more smooth period of recovering. Without state help, we'll survive as well, but not as big scale as it would be possible.
Well, thank you, Mrs. GAVELIENŽ, for your insights. Good news is that the European Commissioner for Justice and Consumer Rights Protection has encouraged the member states to facilitate the issuance of travel vouchers, and this way to help the business to solve this huge problem. And we as lawyers hope that these amendments will be passed by the Lithuanian Parliament and approved by the Lithuanian President. If you allow, we may continue this discussion during the question and answer session. And I now turn to our next speaker, Mrs. Lina Nosevich, who is the head of National Association of Medical Spa and Rehabilitation Centers. Many service providers in this particular segment provide not only the wellness services, but also medical rehabilitation services. Both were very heavily restricted by quarantine measures, and thus I invite Mrs. Nosevich to tell us more about the situation and difficulties and challenges that recreation sector is facing due to the coronavirus outbreak. Mrs. Nosevich, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, dear organizers, guests and participants. Yes, our association represents the health tourism industry that operates under the medical license. It's the medical spas, wellness and rehabilitation centers. Actually, the situation is really sad. The activities of our members was prohibited from March 14 by Lithuanian government. And since mid-March, 3,000 out of 3,300 employees in the health tourism industry are not working because they don't have what to do, or they are on minimal load. Two institutions currently working with the exclusive permission of the health ministry. It's Palanga Rehabilitation Center and Sanatorium Medical Spa Versmė. And Abromiškės is the first institution which is accepting mild COVID patients, but the whole sector can't work because of such a situation. And like ŽYDRŽ mentioned, our sector includes some psychical rehabilitation doctors, physiotherapists, ergotherapists, therapists, and other professionals. Our main goal is to maintain these specialists, and as we know, without staff, we will be not able to provide services, and we can't work. We can help clients to return to the labor market and quality of life. And we all know that Lithuanian tourism contributes 1.2 billion euro to GDP, and being the third after industry and agriculture. And our association members from the last year paid taxes of around 20 million euros yearly. So the main goal is to maintain jobs and professionals and on this industry. As association, we propose the request to the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Health, but the sector has far received no exemptions and no additional support. What we're looking for, of course, we're looking for a bigger communication between ministries, between associations, and we should plan how we will work after the COVID situation will finish. And we keep closely contact with Estonian, German, Slovenian associations, and we know like German rehabilitation centers, they have around 1,000 rehabilitation centers. They are open at this time. Lithuanian government, the decision to close, we understand that they did that, but the situation, we should look how we'll keep keep the working places, how we will work with this sector, and how we'll keep the doctors, how we'll keep nurses, and all our employees.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Masevich, for your overview of the difficulties that medical treatment rehabilitation service providers are currently facing. Perhaps we could discuss a bit further about the possibilities, how to help this particular segment during the question and answer services session. We also have the accommodation service providers, the representative of the accommodation services providers, Mr. Kai SCHUKOWSKI, who is the general manager at Grand Hotel Kempinski. And please, Mr. Kai, share the challenges and the real picture on how the hotel and other perhaps accommodation service providers difficulties that they are facing currently, and what is the exact picture nowadays.
Sure. Well, Labadiena, good afternoon, everybody. Nice to be with you, at least virtually, I suppose. As beautiful as these Zoom calls are, fantastic technology, it's missing one crucial element, I said before, the coffee breaks. So we hope to see you all soon in an offline meeting back in our beautiful hotel. Oh, you have coffee with you, that's good. But yeah, I mean, but for the time being, I guess, keeping the social distance, that's the way forward. So thanks for hosting this, and also thanks for you. I love your newsletter where you're sharing a lot of great information on an ongoing basis. As you said, laws are changing quite frequently, so it's important to stay on top of this. So thanks for that. Yeah, I'm actually right now speaking to you from unfortunately currently shut hotel. As you can imagine, nobody can leave or enter the country, so it really doesn't make economic sense to be opening. As was mentioned before, definitely our industry was certainly one of the most hardest hits, without a shadow of a doubt. Our bloodline is tourists, is travelers, and that's been completely cut off. So it's really, yeah, it becomes an existential question for many, not just hotels, but also restaurants and anyone living of hospitality basically. So definitely very, very challenging times we're all in. I think overall, Lithuania, I must say, we sometimes forget, we focus on the financial crisis, but let's look also at the health part. It is a health crisis at the end of the day. And I think, props to Lithuania. When we look at the numbers, they're really well contained for in comparison to other countries. So that's a good thing. Nevertheless, as this is a global phenomenon, and we are part of that, it does affect us ultimately. And when we look beyond the end of the quarantine date, which we all eagerly look forward to, I think that's when we see the transition from the health crisis to really, as was mentioned before, the financial crisis. So I think the repercussions of the lack of income, of the various savings and deferred payments and what have you, will feel those at the later stage. So that's going to be the second wave. People speak about the second wave of the virus. Well, I wait for the second financial wave, because that's really going to bring havoc to a lot of companies, and I think we have to get ready for this to not be really in a situation that's even worse than we're already in. So when we look beyond Lithuania, we are obviously monitoring, being part of a global company. We have data coming from around the world, most of them obviously in lockdown, but some good momentum kind of coming out of China. So that's nice to see. Obviously, they're sort of seeing about 2 months ahead of the curve, plus or minus, people are saying. Obviously, they had more stringent measures, so hard to say if we follow just 2 months delayed or if it will take longer, because we were less coordinated than China was when they took their lockdown very serious. But overall, we can really see an uptick in occupancy level. That means hotels being busy. Some places, some cities between 30 to 40%. So that's really nice momentum to see. Of course, let's not forget that China by itself has a population of 1.3 billion people, right? So I mean that's pretty much 100% domestic travel, which is going to be a different story in Lithuania, because our domestic travel will be somewhat smaller. So this is something we have to definitely continue to see how we do. But good to see some positivity emerging, and we hope it will trickle down to Lithuania. What we can do locally, I think very important for the politicians, to really come to an agreement on the reopening. I think the closing was extremely uncoordinated, chaotic. Everybody kind of did their own thing. Nobody knew who's closing, what is happening. So I think as a European Union, we have to coordinate this a bit more at Brussels level, I suppose, to really have a clear understanding of when are we all going to open our borders again. Because now we hear President Macron speaking about the Schengen zone opening sometime in September, Austria looking now at May. So it's kind of, again, all over the show. And it doesn't really help if one country is open and all others are closed. So it's kind of, I think there we need some clarity there as well. I definitely agree with JUCIENฑ์also on the continuation of subsidies, because it's nice. I think overall, the Vice Minister said they were delayed. Well, I don't know. Yes, could have been faster. Can always be faster. But overall, I also see other countries who are still struggling with this, and I must say Lithuania actually did it in a quite well manner, quite fast, I would say, clear. But I think it's a danger to stop the subsidies on the day of the quarantine ending, because especially again in certain industries, our business just doesn't come back. So we're going to be hit with 100% payroll without coming any income for the next coming month. So it just doesn't make mathematical sense. So then for many companies, it makes more sense to stay closed until we hit a critical threshold of tourists coming. And that's not helping the overall economy. So I think there has to be a clear continuation, obviously not for the next year, but a couple of months beyond the end of the quarantine. It's crucial to not have a lot of companies foreclosing. I think that's very important. And yeah, we ourselves have definitely to change. We live in a global world, but these days we have to really think locally. It was said before, look at what we can do, engage our local market. We have to change our mindset a little bit, and also be more creative. When we look back at 2008, 2009, in the recession times when a lot of companies closed, companies like Airbnb and Uber were born, right? So there's always opportunity, and if we don't innovate ourselves or change our thinking, definitely it won't help. But I think there are good opportunities. We have to look at hygiene, the way we safeguard our guests, looking at things like buffets. Are people still feeling comfortable going to a buffet and then, eating the scrambled eggs with a spoon that has been touched by 200 people? I don't know. So I think a lot of changes will come, and we have to look into this. But yeah, overall, I think times are tough. There's no denying that. We see some light at the end of the tunnel, but it will take a long time. I mean, STR, which is one of the biggest data aggregator for hotels worldwide, in one of their webinars indicated that only in 2022 we'll return to the same global occupancy and rate level that we're in 2019. So really a bleak outlook, but that may just be a reality. Yeah, so this is the situation we're in. All we can do is remain sort of positive, look at what we can do on our side. And the only good thing we saw at the beginning of the presentation, the slides from Swedbank, with a quite negative indication. I think next year we'll have nice year-on-year growth at least. So that's one good thing to see as well.
Well, thank you, Kai, for this interesting and lively presentation. I'm sorry I have to put a dot here because we're really running out of time. But it was you made a very many interesting insights on the world which is yet to come, and how our habits and attitude will most likely change. But with this note that always look up the bright side of life is encouraging, and China's example as well. Let me introduce our last speaker representing the aviation industry. Let me introduce to you Mrs. RØTA JUCIENŽ, who represents the Scandinavian Airlines. She will perhaps share her insights from the air carrier's perspective, given that the number of flights worldwide have dropped to numbers reaching 84%. But I have heard a very, very encouraging news about Scandinavian airlines coping with this crisis, and really encouraging example on how the cabin crew is being invoked to help the medical workers. Please, Mrs. JUCIENŽ, the floor is yours. We are listening to your insights.
Thank you. I am actually, as you introduced, I will take an opportunity to share experience from a Scandinavian point of view, as being only in Lithuania or not even on the Baltics employee from Scandinavian Airlines. So I can't really talk on the point of view Lithuania. And as we all in this extraordinary situation, when for airline, obviously we had a huge challenge when demand for air travel been actually vanished over the night, and that means that the biggest part of our organization do not have work at the moment. And if you take like profile of our cabin crew, they have an experience to being how to treat customers, how to handle emergency situations, or how to handle crisis, and have a basic medical education. So as an employer, looked how not only to treat own employees, but also how to be important player in the Scandinavian society. And together with the Sophia Helmet University in Stockholm, it been established course for our cabin crew when they have added additional medical education, that they can go and help hospitals and work as the nurses, assistants of the nurses. Same been done recently with in Norway with the Norwegian medical institution. And it's not only this what we do, it's also our administration staff in Stockholm went to the schools education to be English teachers for the schools. So it's a lot of different initiatives, because of course, obviously we want to be in the sky, we want to fly. That's our first business and priority. But we are looking for other way of living through this challenging situation. And of course, it's from the positive side, which being from Scandinavian Airlines, we are looking that our sustainability targets probably will be reached this year. And that's also one thing that is good for the nature. So it's this time it's not only the negative thing. But of course, we are looking now already looking forward, and me being a salesperson, what I am doing, I'm currently actually alone working from all sales Europe. All my colleagues are on the temporary layoff. So what I'm doing, I'm calling our biggest customers, the corporate accounts, and looking how they are looking for the future. And it's very positive to see that most companies are actually on standby. They're just waiting for us to start flights, and they are planning to come to your hotels. So don't worry, they are looking for that. And in that note, I would like to finish that. Of course, we depend on governmental decisions, and of course, we know that the future travel will be different. One of those that we are looking now also how passengers will be seated on the flights and so on. So it's a lot of different issues, but we are depending on the governmental decisions as well. So waiting for that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Mrs. JUCIENŽ, for your overview of the aviation sector. It was very nice to hear some positive notes, and the world is eagering to fly, to restart their lives as everybody was very much used to. And everybody hopes that this moment will come sooner than everybody expects. I sincerely thank to all the participants who had the short presentations. We are now moving to this be-weighted questions and answers session. I see few questions have already been submitted. I encourage all the participants, non-speakers and speakers as well, to submit your questions. And as a warm-up, I would like perhaps all of us to brainstorm on additional measures of state support that would supplement those general ones that were introduced by the Vice Minister. I mean the ones that are designated particularly to the tourism sector in particular, and that are directed to revitalizing this sector during and after the crisis. As we saw, many of them are of the general nature. Of course, the tourism sector may benefit from them. Nevertheless, the industry has a strong belief that special, designated, and perhaps differentiated means may be introduced by the government. Examples may not only be the state aid or financial measures, but also some legislative incentives, changes in regulatory framework, or similar. Some examples, some good practice from other countries involve several EU member states and the United States. Let's say Sweden, they have approved the state aid plan with the European Commission, which is directed to support of airlines, particularly, that are affected by the coronavirus outbreak. Estonia has developed 25 million euros package, which is also directed to the tourism enterprises. In other words, they distribute the proportions of the state aid, which the tourism sector may benefit from. Denmark, again, was it was the first actually member state which has a state aid plan approved by the Commission aiming to support the travel guarantee fund, which is intended for travel cancellations due to coronavirus outbreak. Portugal has several means which are directed to tourism, restaurants, travel agencies. So I do want to start with the Vice Minister and ask whether at the ministerial or governmental level there are any real ideas on the table and real plans to differentiate and to direct particular measures to tourism sector.
Well, the short answer, yes. I mean, we have many ideas, right? But this is what I was trying to say. I mean, and even those Corona coupons that we were referring at the beginning, I don't know if you got it right, but ŽYDRŽ was telling that the president did not approve that yesterday. And one of the main reasons is that the consumers would be left in a weaker position if they are not able to return money in 14 days. So in other words, our dedicated instrument for the tourism was rejected by the president. Now, if we have any other ideas, yes, we do. But is it going to be like cash distribution to the companies? Most probably no. And I can tell you the reason, because we tried to distinguish at the very beginning who is really, you know, the ones to receive, for example, the cash inflows, right? But how can you differentiate saying, for example, hotel is the one to be supported by the government, but for example, the company that does laundry for the hotel alone is not to be supported. So we came up with this approach that we will rather support all the businesses, because as I said, I mean, beside tourism, we have whole aviation industry, whole education, or the culture, theaters. I mean, so many companies being closed, and we cannot, you know, just put into the sidewalks all the other businesses. So now I can just spoil you on what we are doing. So two things. First, we're trying to get a law or the law extension to get those tourism sector dedicated guarantees, so that if the people will be returning money, from the travel agencies, and if travel agencies would be not able to do that, then the government will support. But this is just on the papers yet. It's not been approved by the parliament. The second, the Ministry of Justice, after our tourism law being rejected by the president, we are talking now in putting a special law which would be founded by this particular COVID virus effect on different sectors, and what would be the instruments in supporting the businesses. So in other words, we're now trying to put those tourist coupons into the special law for this particular situation.
Yes, thank you.
Hope that answered the question. Yeah.
Indeed, it's answered the question, and of course raised a few more. Perhaps you would shed some light if there are any measures pursued at the European Union level, talking about this 14 days limitation, which you have referred to. In other words, do the European Union have some ideas on how the regulation, how this directive might be suspended during those hard times?
Well, we issued the official letter from the ministry together with the Ministry of Justice, inquiring the European Commission on how should we treat the directive and whether or not we can have flexibilities. And they were very clear that this is still in law and we cannot break the rules, so to speak.
Understood. It seems that you are the most important participant here, because majority of questions are directed to you. Perhaps you could give some framework in terms of timing, if you have it, when those measures that are aimed to stimulating tourism business that you referred to during your presentation, when are they going to be introduced and be more clear?
If we are talking about stimulating the tourists themselves, I mean, this is not going to happen until the quarantine is over, right? I mean, we cannot promote tourism for the people to move while the borders are locked and everyone is asked to be at home. So I cannot now tell, when exactly we'll put those campaigns on promoting the tourism or domestic tourism, because that very much depends on the quarantine duration. Now, then it comes to those different instruments that I was telling about, those guarantees or loans or capital investment or interest compensations. Most of them are already live, and most of them are already are open for applications. And it's expected that no later than end of April, companies will get refunds to their accounts.
We have another question coming from the restaurants and bars sector. One of the participants asked if the restaurants and bars and at the same time hotels would benefit on reduced VAT on food and beverage. I know there's might be the competence of the state tax inspectorate, but from the Ministry of Economy perspective.
This is, I understand this is a good window, to put those type of ideas on the table. And we've been talking about this tax reduction for many years now, but it's been heavily criticized by Ministry of Finance in the past. Now we have a law amendment in the parliament registered by the parliament member. So in other words, I'm saying that as a government or the ministry cabinet, tax reduction for hotels and restaurants, but there is this unique opportunity with the parliament members to register those type of ideas. And it's now registered. I don't know when exactly it's going to be discussed on the committees, but this is what now the different associations or the sorry, I'm having, you know, double meetings now. They're calling me that I would join in. Sorry.
We're running out of time, but let's have 5 more minutes until we resume, and if you allow us. It seems that Vice Minister is having some.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having multiple meetings now, and they're calling to my phone and then to the computer. So I just wanted to say that this is now in the hands of the business, you know, to promote this idea. They have to go, you know, into the media saying why is that needed. They have to go on the parliament member meetings that this idea get, you know, more and more support.
Perhaps one or two final questions to you, Vice Minister. One is a very good question regarding the subsidies. Will they continue for idle time after the quarantine time is over, or do you have already information on that?
Yeah, so our all instruments, they've been set now until end of 2021. Sorry, 2020, so until the end of the year. But then I talked to the Ministry of Finance yesterday on this total amount, which is now seeing 1.3 billion of euros being this economy subsidies, and I was told by the minister that this is not the limitations, and actually we are now working on the second version of this economy stimulating plan, which will be much more, so to speak, ambitious, because we understand that it's not about only, you know, securing the businesses, but also about stimulating afterwards. So what I want to say is two things. First, it will continue until 2020. So all of those already existing instruments, they're applicable for this whole year. And then the economy plan will be revised for the second version with much more money into that.
Well, thank you very much, Vice Minister. We all understand you're a very busy man nowadays, and you have several other calls. If you need to leave this calls, please do not hesitate of doing so. I invite the other speakers to share their final closing interventions on what may be the additional support measures directed particularly to this broad and very important business sector, and perhaps brainstorm some general ideas and approaches on what might be the further amendments to laws, what might be the further suggestions to the ministry and the government, and perhaps shed some takeaways from this webinar. I suggest we continue in the order how we started. VYTENIS ŠIMKUS, if you are still here with us.
Hi, yes, I am. I think that the example that it took nearly a month from the announcement of economic measures for them to actually start working, it would be the best to try to adapt the existing measures as much as possible to the needs of all businesses, because creating new ones is oftentimes very time consuming. And I'm very glad to hear what Vice Minister said about expanding the scope of the economic support measures program, because looking at the other countries' examples, it no longer seems adequate. A month ago, it seemed quite impressive and ambitious, but other countries moved forward. And now looking at other European countries, we see state loan guaranteeing programs in 10 to 25% of GDP range, depending on the country, which is a very substantial amount of liquidity poured into economy. And 1 billion euro of state guarantees just doesn't cut it. And another thing is to reduce the red tape, reduce the bureaucracy. I think that we should have minimal requirements for companies to apply, and it's better to make errors, to give money to businesses that do not necessarily need it, but to be able to distribute funds much more quickly so that the money actually reaches the people and businesses that need it. And if we make mistakes, we make mistakes, but timeliness is the most important thing now.
Thank you very much for your takeaways and insights. ŽYDRą, Gavelienę, could you share your ideas after this webinar and perhaps produce some insights on what may be the next steps?
Yes, thank you. Actually, we have all to understand that Lithuanian tourism industry will not survive on internal money spent here in Lithuania. I mean, money from locals. We have to agree that the biggest headache and the biggest challenge is to invite foreigners to come to Lithuania, and there we need incentives for airlines, for agencies, for hotels, to work as much as possible to invite everyone to come to Lithuania.
Oh, thank you, ŽYDRą. Lina Nosevich, do you have some insights from you?
Yeah, we actually agree with ŽYDRą. A lot of health tourists are coming from Israel, from Germany, from other countries. So that support we need to increase the budget for promotion, for marketing. And the second, what we are looking for, we already did offer for government that during the quarantine time to support sanatoriums and medical spa and rehabilitation centers like subsidies, which could be this sum which paid last year the national health insurance to the sanatoriums and medical spa and rehabilitation centers. That was our offer to the government, but still we didn't get the answer.
As a matter of fact, the government is incentivizing to be approached on a ministerial and governmental level by the associations. This particular tourism sector is very much gathered into associations of different service providers, and though all the incentives and all the initiatives that are provided by the sector players in the configuration of associations were very much welcomed. I believe it is the workflow which the government is facing and different inquiries, but nevertheless, each and every association is very much important, and all the good initiatives that would help this sector or any other sector to survive those hard times should be taken into account and considered very much with due care and respect and open-mindedness. Two more minutes as a final remarks. I believe that Kai from Kempinski and RØTA JUCIENŽ, just a few sentences, because we're really running out of time and have a very restricted timing here. Kai.
Well, I'm very happy that you're recording the call, because if I'm not mistaken, the minister basically admitted the subsidies will be extended until end of the year, if I'm not mistaken. So that's, I must say, really, really nice to hear. And if that's the case, then I think that would be tremendous help and support. Yeah, so that would help really a lot. And then it's just a natural evolution of, you know, coming back to a sort of normal life. and then it's up to us as the organizations, and in line with GAVELIENŽ, their creativity, maybe at the Lithuanian level, to maybe find USPs of bringing the people why to come to Lithuania. And we have many advantages, space, greenery. So I think there's a way that we can find a good angle for international travelers to not go into congested Barcelona, congested London, but to come to Vilnius where you have space, and so on. Sorry, ŽYDRŽ, I don't want
perhaps the marketing is the answer.
Exactly. I'm talking about inbound. I understand, ŽYDRŽ, you have also other concerns, but in that way to bring the people into the country.
Yes, of course. And RÚTA, as the final participant.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to explain that we didn't receive as an airline monetary funds from governments, as you said. We did only got guarantees from governments that we can take loans from the banks. So it's a completely different thing and understanding for many. But what I would like to say that as we see, the first will be, of course, domestic travel. Secondly, EU travel. And what we need that all countries in EU would coordinate and open space together, or borders together, because otherwise it will be very difficult for tourism, for hotels, for everyone, if one country will allow, another will not. Yeah.
Well, thank you on behalf of the organizers. I thank you all the attendees, both the speakers and non-speaker participants, for participation in this webinar, and we truly hope that it has met your expectations. Hope to see you all lively in personal very soon after this quarantine situation is over. All the best of luck to all the businesses in coping this serious and painful situation. I wish you a great afternoon, and please do stay healthy and safe.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.